Hello, viewers, and welcome to a new episode on our ongoing lecture series on our theories and models of mass communication. Today, our topic of discussion is called the hypodermic needle theory, or as it is also known, the magic bullet theory. To discuss this topic, we have with us Ms. Shubha Das Modlik, who is a teacher of media studies. Welcome, ma'am.
Hello, viewers.
I am Shantan Mukherjee, a student of media. So tell us, ma'am, what is this hypodermic needle theory all about?
Actually, hypodermic needle theory is more of a model of mass communication rather than a well-developed theory.
Okay.
And this became popular. In fact, it is one of the earliest models of mass communication to have developed. Naturally in America, because the mass media became popular in America rather than in Europe first.
Indeed.
Okay, Europe was a little slow to catch on. So after the tremendous popularity of films, and then radio came into America in the early 1920s. I think the first radio station was set up in 1920 or 21. And then radio also captured the imagination of the people, and very soon, within 2 years, 60% of Americans began owning a radio set, and so many radio broadcasting stations were set up, which were all privately run. So the main revenue model was through radio advertisements. So this tremendous popularity of radio as well as cinema led to the formulation of this hypodermic needle theory, which, as you said, is also known as the magic bullet theory. Now, in order to understand that what this theory or what this model of communication is, let us take a look at this film clipping. It's a small 2 minutes long clipping from a 1976 film called Network, made by Sidney Lumet. So now that you have seen the clipping, okay, what do you conclude? What is your first observation? First thing that comes to your mind?
It's rather frightening how media can affect lots of people at the same time and cause a panic of sorts.
Okay, so that means this was actually, you saw this hypodermic needle model in action.
Yes.
All right, the person, it was happening live. The television anchor in the television studio, UBS, that's a fictitious television channel. In the UBS studio, he was crying his lungs out that everybody open your window and come out and say, I am mad as hell and I can't take it anymore. He kept on saying this, and immediately it had an effect. People actually came out to their window, opened their window, stuck out their torsos and kept shouting. So that exactly you saw that hypodermic needle model in action. So therefore, what is this hypodermic needle model? The hypodermic needle model implies that mass media has a direct, immediate and powerful effect on its audience.
Okay.
Direct, immediate and powerful effect on its audience, means not just on one person but on the entire mass of people. Okay, so that is the model of communication. It is one of the earliest models of communication that was propounded by the media theorists, and it was quite popular. People really believed in it in the 30s and 40s, and then after the mid 1940s, it fell out of favor, and we will see shortly why it fell out of favor.
Okay.
So now this is in a nutshell, this is what the hypodermic needle model says. It's like a poster of the hypodermic needle model. So you see two interesting pictures at the lower part of the poster.
Yes.
Okay, what do you see there?
I think it's the American military asking its people to join them.
Exactly. Okay,
Yes.
and directly addressing
Yes.
that you
Who's absent?
Who is absent?
Is it you?
It's you.
Yes.
Okay, so directly addressing the audience and motivating the audience to join the army,
Yes,
okay, or join
yes.
the military force, whatever. Okay, and the image on top, it's a kind of graphical representation of hypodermic needle model, that the media message is injected directly into the brain or the mind of the audience with expectations of an immediate effect.
Okay.
Okay, now what are the factors that have contributed to this, as they say, the strong effects theory? Okay, some people even call it the strong effects theory. Number one, as I said, the fast rise and popularization of radio and television. First the radio, and then the television became popular after the Second World War. Second thing, the emergence of the persuasion industries such as advertising and propaganda.
Okay.
Now, what is a persuasion industry? Persuasion industry is an industry or a business enterprise whose purpose is to persuade the people, persuade the consumers to consume, to buy, or and indirectly to follow a certain lifestyle. All right. So obviously advertisements. Now, it so happened that during the Second World War, and then there was this depression also in 1939. So, the depression as well as the Second World War, both of these factors had contributed to a very frugal lifestyle of the Americans. The Americans were kind of asked to be less spending, to save up, to save for, because you never know what kind of days are lying ahead. Okay, so they were not encouraged to be very much
carefree.
Carefree and throw away the money and to be voracious consumers. But after the war was won, okay, and the shadows of the war receded, and America started coming out of the depression also. That was also the time when television became rapidly popular. And television, the entire industry of television was fueled by these advertisements. Okay. So the great American dream, as we say, that was reinvented by the advertising industry. And the Americans were encouraged to be voracious consumers, not to save for the rainy day because rainy days were over. Okay, to spend their money, to have a good time. Okay, so that kind of a lifestyle. All right. So that had an effect, particularly on children, because many of these advertisements were targeted to children. Okay. So that's when the media theories became very frightened that America is heading towards this consumerist society, and the children also from a very early age they are being molded into voracious consumers. What end effect is it going to have?
True.
Okay. So the media theorists or the media analysts were a little alarmed by it. Then the third important thing was the Pine Fund studies, which was conducted in the 1930s.
Okay.
So what is this Pine Fund studies? This was a research initiated by Motion Pictures Council of America, which was concerned about the long-term impact of movies, particularly on American children. Okay, when too much of violence and sex was depicted, or whatever strong scenes with strong emotional contents were depicted, children also were taken to the films. They also watched the films. Okay, so what long-term impact did it leave in the minds of the children? Even the issues of morality. Okay, what is good, what is bad, what it means to be a good citizen, a law-abiding citizen. All right. So all these questions were raised, and that's why this Pine Foundation funded this study, which happened for a few years, and then the research reports were published, which clearly showed that actually these movies had a strong impact on the minds of the children, also on the minds of the youth. That's why the families were breaking up, the divorce rates were increasing, and so on and so forth. Okay. So that also raised an alarm bell, the Pine Foundation studies, which were on the long-term impact of movies. And then after the Second World War, even during the Second World War, the entire world was actually kind of dumbfounded by Hitler's propaganda machine. If you read Hitler's Mein Kampf, then that is his autobiography, you will see that he has theorized on the science of propaganda. He has written paragraph that what is propaganda, how it should be done, okay, how it can be effective, and so on. And so when Hitler came in control, he was the ruler of Germany, the head of the German government. He deployed his propaganda machine. Goebbels was his propaganda minister. He monopolized the entire media, the radio and the newspapers and everything. And they were also the movies, and they were entirely deployed for the propaganda of the Third Reich, as we say, of the Nazi party. And the entire world just sat and watched. Oh my God. So they raised propaganda to a level of high art.
Great.
So these were the things that were there in front of the eyes of the media analysts, which gave rise to this hypodermic needle theory. Now, what are the core assumptions of this hypodermic needle theory? The core assumptions are that in a capitalist consumerist society, the individuals are atomized individuals, which means that the individuals, they do not live in a networked society. The neighbors do not know each other. There isn't much of a strong relationship between co-workers, colleagues at the place of work. Okay, so individually they are atomized individuals. They have left their families behind and migrated to the city for the sake of job. So they do not have a family to rely on. They do not have a strong group of friends to rely on. So they are depending on the media, and they are voracious consumers of the media. Okay, so that was thing. The individuals are atomized individuals. Number two, they were passive. Okay, so therefore whatever is dished out by the media is lapped up by the consumers, by the media consumers, and that has an immediate effect, because in the absence of any other stimulus, so whatever is dished out by the media is like a stimulus. Okay, so that immediately activates the brain cells, and that has an immediate effect. Okay, so from these thoughts arose this model of hypodermic needle model, or the magic bullet model. And both the imageries, hypodermic needle as well as magic bullet, both the imageries have this connotation of this immediate effect. You know, you inject something and immediately you see the result. Okay, or you take a magic bullet and immediately you see the result.
Absolutely.
Now, what is a passive audience? Okay, now passive audience is an idea of an audience that suggests that some people just accept the media when they see it automatically without giving a second thought to it. Okay, that's what is known as a passive audience. Whatever they see on TV, they believe. They don't question it. Whatever they read in the newspaper or whatever they hear on the radio, they just believe it unquestioningly. So is the media, it is coming from a powerful institution, therefore it has to be right. So people end up thinking what they are told because there is no other source of information. There is no alternative source of information from which they can verify the information also. Okay, so they have no other option but to believe in it. So the magic bullet theory was not based on, as I said, it's not a well-founded theory because it was not based on any media research done on the media audience. Okay. But it was based on certain assumptions that all human beings, they are biological beings and they have the same instinct and they can be controlled by the same kind of stimulus fed to them.
That is impossible.
Okay, yeah, that is definitely flawed. That's a flawed assumption. But the entire model was based on this flawed assumption.
Okay.
Let me read out the features of the magic bullet theory one by one. The first feature is human beings are believed to act uniformly to their stimuli and instincts. That means you give the same stimulus to all the human beings, they are all basically human beings, so their response to the stimuli will be the same. That is one assumption. Again, it's a flawed assumption.
Very flawed, yes.
Because every human mind is different.
Yes.
So it's one of the earliest models of mass communication. And that is why it is so flawed. Then the second feature is that media injects or inserts messages into the people's brains as propaganda and manipulation, like that of a bullet or a syringe.
Yes.
Okay. Messages have their own intention and are sent to get desired outcome.
Okay.
And then, like you join the army, just what I showed
yes.
you. That way. The effect of message is supposed to be encompassing, strong, immediate and dangerous. And then messages are supposed to create public opinion and change behavior of the audience. That means bring in a mass scale change in behavior. Not just in one individual, but a mass scale change in behavior. And mass of people is made to think in a similar way by the media. That means media has a homogenizing effect. Everybody is dished out the same thing, fed the same thing. Therefore, everybody's thinking will be the same. Media has a homogenizing effect, which of course is true to a large extent.
Yes.
And the audience is always thought to be vulnerable and passive, which also the audience, you cannot generalize. There is definitely a large amount of vulnerability, but then everybody is not vulnerable and passive. And there was a very interesting example at that time in 1938 to support this theory. It was a radio broadcast made by Orson Welles. Now, in 1938, he started his career as a radio anchor. He was only 23 years old and he worked in Mercury Radio, a small radio company that had just come up. And they had conceived a program for Halloween Day, 30th October, Halloween Day, in 1938. and the program was broadcast on Columbia Broadcasting Service, which is one of the national networks in America. Okay. The program is War of the Worlds, which is actually a science fiction written by H.G. Wells. He had written it in the 19th century. At least 30 years back, 40 years back he had
Okay, Spielberg made a movie out of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So War of the Worlds, which is basically presuming that there is life in Mars. Okay,
Yes.
and the Martians can come to the world, come to the Earth one day. Okay. Now this was a widespread belief in 1938 that there is life in Mars, because some scientists said that they have seen polar ice caps on Mars. When they have looked at Mars through the telescope, they have seen polar ice caps. That means there is water on Mars, and the polar ice caps change with the changing season. Their intensity and spread changes with the changing season because the ice melts and all that. Okay, so there was a widespread belief that actually there is life on Mars. Okay, now this entire radio program, 1 hour long radio program, so Orson Welles says that it is a day like this, that there is a belief that there is life on Mars. Okay, and then he interviews a scientist that what can the life of Mars be like, and the scientist says something, and then there is an interjection and which says it's just been spotted that a strange looking spaceship has landed on such and such field near New York. And then again the radio discussion between Orson Welles and the scientist goes on, and again there is an intervention that strange creatures are seen coming down from the spaceship. Okay, so like that, the whole thing was structured like a interview program with interjections of news updates, and people listened to it, people believed it. And it is recorded that 12 million people listened to it, and 1 million people started panicking. They came out of their offices. They thought, oh my God, the Martians are going to take over. And they started moving out of New York City. So there was stampede, there was traffic blockade, because everybody wanted to move out of New York City. And some were curious to see the space fight happening on Wall Street.
Yes.
That was one section of the crowd, was that also. And then towards the end of the program, Orson Welles was saying that Times Square is deserted, and we can see a strange creature with rickety legs, with a shred of flesh sticking out of the mouth, walking alone on along Times Square, or something like that. Some very, very graphic imagery he was putting.
They did
and
not
then
verify.
in the end he said, oh, but actually everything is okay. This was just our way of coming out of our sheets and saying boo to you, because Halloween means you see ghosts everywhere.
Ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Mercury Theater and star of these broadcasts, Orson Welles.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet as mortal as his own. We know now that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
And this has gone down in the history of media as the panic broadcast, because it actually created panic. Okay. Now this example is cited as an example that look, bullet theory works. It was a live broadcast. People listened to it. They didn't question it. They believed it, and immediately they sprang into action. What was that action? They went out to the streets. They started deserting New York, going out of New York to save their lives, and so on. Okay, so this is a proof that magic bullet theory works. Okay. But then later on, many clarifications were sought, and it was found that actually 12 million people didn't listen to that broadcast, because there were other interesting things being broadcast on the other radio channels. So everybody was not tuned into CBS. Okay. Number two, this 1 million people panicked, that is also an exaggeration. Okay. That's a deliberate exaggeration. And the third thing, this idea of panic was actually triggered by the newspapers, because the newspapers saw radio as their competitor. They were threatened by the coming of this upstart medium called radio.
Okay.
Understood? So therefore they said,
Okay.
see, this is how you can play pranks on radio. So this was their chance to take it out on radio, to make
Okay.
radio unpopular in the eyes of the people. That radio can easily fool you. And
Okay.
also CBS, I mean, America is a country where the law is very stringent, okay? So the CBS had made Orson Welles announce in the beginning of the program that this is just an entertainment show. Okay, don't take it seriously. And somewhere in the middle also he announced it. Okay, because it was mandatory for him to announce it, but that must have been overlooked by the audience. You never know. How did the magic bullet theory lose out? I mean, how did it come out of favor? That was when these three social scientists, Paul Lazarsfeld, Herta Herzog, and Hadley Cantrill, they conducted a research on the voting pattern of the American people in 1940 during the election campaign of Roosevelt. Okay, maybe they were commissioned by Roosevelt to do so, and to their surprise, they found that when they gave a survey question to the people or had face-to-face interviews and group discussions with people, to their surprise, they found that the people said that they do not rely so much on what they read in the newspaper or the newspaper campaigns. They rely more on their peer groups, what the head of the family says or what the head of the community that they live in says, okay? Or whatever discussion they have, political discussion they have, and something emerges out of, they come to arrive at their own conclusion. Okay, so they depend more on this word of mouth interaction, on this personal influence, personal interaction, rather than what comes out in the media, in the newspapers as well as in the radio. So that was a revelation. Okay, because they did a scientific research. They took a sample, huge sample size, because this research went on for 2-3 years. Huge sample size, they collected data, they analyzed the data, and then they brought out a book called The People's Choice. Okay? So it's the people's choice that actually disproved the hypodermic needle theory. So hypodermic needle theory was popular for some time, as I said, in the 20s and 30s, but from the 1940s, from the mid-40s, after the book was published, it started falling out. I mean, it started losing its popularity, and then today, of course, it's a completely discarded theory. And the situation that I showed you in the beginning, that is, of course, a cinematic construction. Okay, it is not likely to happen the way it was shown in a realistic situation.
In
it's
that scale, no.
It is not likely to happen like that. But in an extreme case, when there is a real panic and when people have to depend on the media for information, there, of course, the hypodermic needle theory can work in an extreme situation when say supposing India is at war or when there is a terror attack. Okay, so then this word of mouth and personal influence cannot work. So then the hypodermic needle theory can work in an extreme situation. All right. So in conclusion, I would like to say that the hypodermic needle model, one of the earliest mass communication models to have been propounded, is not a model based on founded on sound theoretical foundation, but it was rather based on certain assumptions of human behavior. The assumptions themselves were flawed, and so therefore the hypodermic needle model has been discredited completely, and the other more complex models have now gained currency. Thank you very much.